A resignation letter sat on the mahogany desk, crisp and white against the dark wood. It was a simple piece of paper, yet it carried the weight of a death sentence. She packed her bags in silence, thinking she could walk away from a man who owned half the city. But monsters in tailored suits don't accept 2 weeks' notice. When she reached for the door handle, his heavy shadow swallowed her. He wasn't letting his best-kept secret walk out alive. The paper felt heavier than it should have. 32-pound stock, cream-colored, professional. Clara Bennett stared at the single paragraph printed in sharp black ink. It was a standard corporate resignation, effective immediately. No explanations, no apologies, no well wishes for the future of the Costa Syndicate. She stood in the center of Gabriel Costa's office. It was 6 a.m. The city below was shrouded in a damp gray fog, the kind that clung to the skyscrapers and muted the sirens on the street level. His office smelled faintly of espresso and the expensive cedarwood cologne he wore. Clara placed the envelope squarely in the center of his leather desk pad. She aligned the edges perfectly with the stitching of the leather. Old habits died hard. For 4 years, her life had been about aligning Gabriel's world. She had covered up his financial indiscretions, managed his legitimate real estate fronts, and quietly disposed of the tailored suits ruined in back-alley disagreements. She knew his coffee order, his banking passwords, and the exact tone of voice he used right before he ordered a man's legs broken. The heavy oak doors clicked open. Gabriel walked in. He didn't look like a man who had just celebrated his engagement to the heiress of a rival family. He looked tired. He wore a crisp white shirt, the collar open, his tie hanging loosely around his neck. He paused in the doorway, his dark eyes locking onto Clara. He didn't seem surprised to see her here at this hour. He never was. "You're early," Gabriel said. His voice was a low rumble, gravel over silk. It lacked the performative warmth he used in public. With Clara, he was always stripped down to the studs. "I have a lot to do today," Clara replied. Her voice held steady. She had practiced this moment in the mirror of her tiny bathroom for 3 hours. Gabriel walked behind his desk. He didn't sit down. He braced his knuckles against the edge of the wood, leaning forward slightly. His gaze dropped to the cream-colored envelope. He didn't touch it. He just stared at it for a long, silent moment. The hum of the climate control system felt deafening in the quiet room. "What is this?" he asked. "It's exactly what it looks like," Clara said. Gabriel slowly raised his eyes to meet hers. There was no anger in them. That was the terrifying part. Gabriel Costa only got angry when he was losing control. Right now, he looked like a man trying to solve a particularly boring puzzle. "You don't do paperwork, Clara. Not for us," he said, tapping a long finger against the envelope. "If you need time off, you take it. If you need money, you ask for it." "It's a resignation, Gabriel." She used his first name. She rarely did that in the office. It felt strange on her tongue, sharp and forbidden. "I'm done." He finally picked up the envelope. He didn't open it. He held it between his thumb and index finger, testing its weight. "Done," he repeated. The word sounded foreign in his mouth. "People don't get done in this business. You know that better than anyone." "I'm not people. I'm your executive assistant. My contract is up for renewal at the end of the month. I am choosing not to renew." Gabriel let out a short, humorless breath that might have been a laugh. He tossed the envelope back onto the desk. "A contract. You think a piece of paper signed 4 years ago is what binds you to me? I think, Clara said, stepping back, putting distance between herself and the desk, that you are getting married in 6 months to Isabella Marino. I think your family is merging with hers. I think you don't need a fixer anymore. You need a wife, a public relations team, and a clean slate. I don't fit into a clean slate. Gabriel watched her. He noted the step back. He noted the way she held her purse tight against her side, like a shield. My marriage to Isabella is a transaction. It's land, it's shipping routes, it's peace on the south side. I know what it is. I drafted the prenup, Clara shot back, the bitterness leaking through her carefully constructed armor. She cursed herself for it. She wanted to remain cold. I know exactly what it is, and I know what I am. I'm the woman who cleans up the mess so you can go home to her. I'm not doing it anymore. Gabriel rounded the desk. He moved with a heavy, fluid grace. Clara held her ground, forcing herself not to retreat further. He stopped a foot away from her. Up close, she could see the faint shadow of exhaustion under his eyes. You are exactly where you belong, Gabriel said quietly. Right here, managing the chaos. I'm giving my 2 weeks, standard corporate courtesy. Gabriel reached out. He didn't grab her arm or her throat. He gently took the strap of her purse, his fingers brushing against her knuckles. The touch was electric, familiar, and entirely devastating. Go home, Clara, he murmured. Take the weekend, drink some wine, sleep. I'll see you on Monday. He walked past her, heading toward the private liquor cabinet in the corner. He dismissed her. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a command. Clara turned and walked toward the door. She didn't look back. She had done her part. She had given notice. It didn't matter if he accepted it or not. By Monday, she would be gone. The decision hadn't been born out of sudden heartbreak. Clara wasn't naive enough for heartbreak. She had spent the last 4 years fully aware of what she was to Gabriel. She was a utility, a highly valued, deeply trusted, occasionally intimate utility. The fracture had happened 12 hours prior in the grand ballroom of the St. Regis. The engagement party was a masterclass in organized crime masquerading as high society. The room was dripping in crystal chandeliers and imported white orchids. Men who ordered hits over breakfast were wearing $10,000 tuxedos, laughing with politicians they had bought a decade ago. Clara had stood near the back, blending into the shadows by the service doors. She wore a simple, unadorned black dress. Her job was to observe, to make sure the Marino brothers didn't drink too much and start a brawl, to ensure the mayor was photographed shaking hands with Gabriel's uncle, but not with Gabriel's enforcer. And then she watched Gabriel. He was standing in the center of the room, holding court. Isabella Marino was draped over his arm. She was beautiful in a predictable, curated way. Flawless skin, cascading dark hair, a gown that cost more than Clara's annual salary. Isabella looked at Gabriel with a mixture of possession and triumph. Clara had watched Gabriel lean down and whisper something in Isabella's ear. Isabella laughed, throwing her head back, her hand resting flat against Gabriel's chest. Gabriel smiled. It wasn't his real smile, the one that reached the corners of his eyes when he was genuinely amused by something Clara said in the quiet of a late-night work session. It was his public smile, calculating, hollow, but it was effective. At that moment, Clara felt a cold, hard knot form in her stomach. It wasn't jealousy, Jealousy implied she felt she had a right to him. She didn't. What she felt was a profound, suffocating realization of her own obsolescence. Later that evening, the party had shifted. The older generation retired, and the younger crowd moved to the private suites upstairs. Clara had retreated to a quiet alcove off the main hallway to check the security perimeter on her tablet. She hadn't heard Gabriel approach until the scent of cedarwood and scotch surrounded her. "You're hiding," he said. Clara kept her eyes on the screen. "I'm monitoring the exits. Paulie Marino is drunk and arguing with the coat check girl. I've sent security." Gabriel reached out and closed the cover of her tablet. The screen went black. The hallway was dim, lit only by the warm glow of wall sconces. He stepped into her personal space, blocking her in against the flocked wallpaper. "Look at me," he commanded softly. Clara raised her eyes. He looked exhausted. The mask was slipping. He reached up and brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His knuckles grazed her jawline. "Tell me this night is almost over," he muttered, resting his forehead against the wall just above her shoulder. "It's a success," Clara replied evenly. "The families are happy. The press got the photos they needed. You played your part perfectly." Gabriel pulled back slightly, his dark eyes searching her face. He was looking for a crack, a sign of the emotional devotion he was so accustomed to receiving from her. "I don't care about the families right now. I'm asking you." "I'm fine, Gabriel. You look beautiful," he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was a statement of fact, delivered with a heavy sigh, as if her appearance was just another problem he had to manage. He leaned in, his lips brushing the sensitive skin just below her ear. "Come to the penthouse later, after I put on a show for Isabella and send her home. Wait for me." For 3 years, that had been the arrangement. The stolen hours between the violence and the business. The quiet moments where he belonged to no one but himself, and by extension, to her. But standing there in the hallway, listening to the muffled bass of the music and the laughter of his future wife down the hall, the words tasted like ash. "I can't tonight," Clara said, stepping sideways, slipping out from under his imposing frame. "I have early prep for the board meeting." Gabriel frowned. A genuine flicker of confusion crossed his features. He wasn't used to being denied. "Clara." "Good night, Mr. Costa. Congratulations on your engagement." She had walked away. She felt his eyes burning into her spine with every step she took down the carpeted hallway. She didn't go to the penthouse. She went to her own apartment, pulled out a small, heavy-duty duffel bag from under her bed, and started packing. She wasn't going to be the mistress in the shadows while he built a dynasty in the light. She had too much pride for that, and he had too much power. If she stayed, he would consume her completely, leaving nothing but a shell of a woman who lived and died by his schedule. She had drafted the resignation letter at 4 a.m. Friday afternoon. Clara moved through her apartment with mechanical efficiency. She had 48 hours before Gabriel realized she wasn't coming back on Monday. By the time he connected the dots, she needed to be entirely untraceable. She had a burner phone, 3 fake IDs curated over the years for company emergencies, and a stash of hard cash hidden inside a hollowed-out encyclopedia on her bookshelf. It was $60,000. Enough to disappear, re-establish herself in a mid-sized European city, and never look at a spreadsheet again. She zipped the duffel bag closed. She looked around the small, sterile apartment. She hadn't bothered to decorate it over the years. It was just a place to sleep between shifts at the syndicate. There was nothing here to miss. She grabbed her laptop to do one final sweep of her digital footprint. She needed to transfer a small, legitimate severance from her main checking account to an offshore shell just to cover immediate travel expenses without touching the cash yet. She logged into her banking portal. Error. Account suspended. Please contact your branch manager. Clara stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. She clicked refresh. The red text glared back at her. A cold sweat broke out on her neck. She quickly opened a new tab and logged into her secondary account at a different bank. Error. Access denied. Fraud alert. Triggered. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She checked her credit cards. Frozen. She logged into the airline portal to verify her 9 p.m. flight out of O'Hare to Heathrow. Reservation canceled. Clara stared at the screen. The dull ache behind her ribs sharpened into a frantic, pulsing panic. She stood up, knocking the chair backward. It hit the hardwood floor with a loud crack. She wasn't stupid. She knew Gabriel had reach. But to coordinate a total financial freeze across 4 different institutions and an international airline in the span of 6 hours, that wasn't just power. That was focused, calculated obsession. She grabbed her duffel bag. The cash. She still had the cash. She could take a bus, a train, anything that didn't require digital verification. She slung the heavy strap over her shoulder and moved toward the front door. She reached for the deadbolt. Before her fingers could touch the brass, she heard the distinct, heavy click of a key turning in the lock from the outside. Clara froze. She stepped back as the door swung open. Gabriel stood in the doorway. He had shed the suit jacket and the tie. He was just wearing the white button-down, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing the dark ink of the syndicate tattoos wrapping around his wrists. He held a small, silver key in his hand. Her spare key, the one she kept locked in a secure box at the office for emergencies. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The click of the lock echoing in the quiet apartment sounded like a vault slamming shut. Gabriel looked at her. He looked at the heavy duffel bag strapped across her chest. He looked at the overturned chair by the desk. He didn't look angry. He looked profoundly disappointed. "Where are you going, Clara?" he asked. His voice was soft, reasonable, and terrifying. "You froze my accounts," she said, her voice shaking slightly despite her best efforts. "You canceled my flight. You tried to run," he corrected gently, walking further into the room. He tossed her spare key onto the kitchen counter. It landed with a sharp clatter. "After I explicitly told you to take the weekend and rest, you decided to pack a bag and book a flight to London under a false name. How did you know?" "I know everything," Gabriel said simply. "I know about the 60 grand in the hollowed-out book. I know about the burner phone in your coat pocket. I built the security infrastructure you use to hide things, Clara." "Did you really think you could hide from me using my own tools?" Clara dropped the duffel bag. It hit the floor heavily. "Let me go, Gabriel. You have your merger. You have Isabella. I gave you 4 years of my life. I gave you everything. We are square." Gabriel stopped a few feet away from her. The exhaustion from the morning was gone, replaced by a cold, predatory focus. He reached out and grabbed her chin, his grip firm but not bruising. He tilted her face up to force her to look into his eyes. "Square," he repeated, the word dripping with quiet venom. "You think this is a ledger? You think you can balance the books and walk away from me?" I don't belong here anymore, Clara whispered, hating the way her voice broke, hating the way her body betrayed her, leaning into his touch even now. Gabriel's thumb stroked her cheekbone, a gesture so tender it felt violently out of place. You don't get to decide where you belong, not anymore. He stepped closer, his chest brushing against hers, backing her slowly toward the wall. Isabella is business, a name on a contract to keep the peace. You know this. I don't care, Clara fired back, finally finding her anger. I don't care if she's a saint or a business deal. I will not stand in the shadows and clean the blood off your hands while you play house with a mafia princess. Gabriel's eyes darkened. The calm facade cracked, revealing the raw, possessive violence underneath. He pressed her back against the wall, crowding her, making sure she felt the sheer, physical difference between them. You think I'm letting you walk out that door? Gabriel's voice dropped to a rough whisper, his face inches from hers. You know where the bodies are buried, Clara, because you handed me the shovel. You think I'm going to let you take a flight to London and disappear? Then kill me, she challenged, staring up at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. Because that's the only way I'm staying, Gabriel laughed, a dark, breathless sound that held no humor. He leaned his forehead against hers. I'm not going to kill you, Clara, and you're not going to leave. He moved one hand down to rest on the pulse point at her neck, feeling the frantic, terrified rhythm of her heartbeat. You're not leaving, the Mafia boss said, the finality in his tone echoing like a gavel striking wood. You are mine. The contract never had an expiration date. You're just going to have to learn how to share the world I'm building. Or I will lock you in a cage so high no one will ever find you. He stepped back, adjusting his cuffs with terrifying nonchalance. Unpack your bag. We have a dinner to attend. The dress he had waiting for her was midnight blue silk. It wasn't a dress an assistant wore to a business dinner. It was the kind of garment designed to draw eyes and silence conversations. Clara left it on the bed in his penthouse for 20 minutes, sitting in the velvet armchair by the window, staring at the Chicago skyline. She weighed her options. She could refuse to put it on. Gabriel would likely cancel the dinner, keep her locked in this room, and let the ensuing silence suffocate her. Or she could play the hand she was dealt, observe the board, and look for a vulnerability. Clara stood up. She unbuttoned her practical gray blazer. She was a fixer. You couldn't fix a problem from the sidelines. You had to be in the room. When she stepped into the private elevator an hour later, Gabriel was waiting. He wore a charcoal suit cut so sharply it looked like armor. His eyes dragged over her, taking in the way the silk clung to her frame, the severe twist of her hair, the total absence of jewelry. He looked satisfied. It was a proprietary look, and it made Clara's stomach turn. You look exactly as you should, Gabriel said, the elevator doors sliding shut, sealing them in a descending wood-paneled box. Like a hostage? Clara asked. She didn't look at him. She watched the floor numbers tick down in the brass display. Like someone who belongs at the table. The dinner was at a private club in the Gold Coast, a place without a sign, where membership required generational wealth and a profound lack of morals. They bypassed the main dining room and were escorted to a private wine cellar in the back. Isabella Marino was already there. She sat at the head of a long oak table, sipping a pale white wine. Beside her sat her older brother, Leo. Leo was a brute in a Brioni suit. He lacked Gabrielle's terrifying restraint. Leo handled the Marino family's street-level collections, and his knuckles still bore the faint yellowish bruises of his trade. Isabella's smile faltered for a fraction of a second when Gabriel walked in with Clara, trailing half a step behind him. Clara saw the calculation in the younger woman's eyes. Isabella was bred for this world. She knew a mistress when she saw one, but she also knew her role. Gabriel pulled out a chair for Isabella, leaning down to press a kiss to her cheek. It was a flawless performance of devotion. Then he pulled out the chair directly to his right. He looked at Clara. Clara sat. She didn't flinch under Leo's heavy, suspicious glare. She folded her hands in her lap. "Gabriel," Leo rumbled, his voice thick with cigar smoke and cheap whiskey. "I thought this was family only tonight, finalizing the shipping contracts." He gestured toward Clara with a heavy hand. "Why is the help here?" Gabriel poured himself a glass of water. He moved with agonizing slowness. "Clara oversees the logistical routing for the South Side ports. If we are discussing shipping, she needs to be here to ensure your family doesn't disrupt my current supply chains." It was a lie. The routing was handled by a separate division. Clara managed Gabriel, not the boats. But the lie was delivered with such absolute authority that Leo snapped his mouth shut, his jaw working in silent anger. Dinner arrived in silent, choreographed waves. Dover sole, charred asparagus, truffles shaved over risotto. Clara ate nothing. She drank flat water. She watched Gabriel operate. He was brilliant. It was the very reason she had stayed so long. He navigated Leo's aggressive posturing and Isabella's cloying affection with the precision of a surgeon. He gave them just enough power to make them feel respected, while maintaining absolute control of the room. And throughout it all, he kept his left hand resting on the table, inches from Clara's plate. A physical boundary. A warning to the room. "So, Clara," Isabella purred midway through the main course, resting her chin on her hand. Her diamond engagement ring caught the low light of the cellar. It was 4 carats, emerald cut. "Gabriel tells me you've been with him for years. It must be so exhausting, keeping track of all his little messes." The insult was veiled in a sweet melodic tone. Leo chuckled, slicing into his meat with unnecessary force. Clara met Isabella's gaze evenly. There was a time, perhaps yesterday, when she would have diffused the tension with a polite, deferential response. But yesterday, she was an employee. Tonight, her bank accounts were frozen, and her passport was currently sitting in Gabriel's breast pocket. "It requires a specific skill set," Clara said, her voice quiet, carrying effortlessly over the low hum of the cellar's climate control. "Most people find the reality of this business unpalatable. They prefer the benefits of the power, without understanding the mechanics of how it's kept. I manage the mechanics." She let her eyes drift to the massive diamond on Isabella's finger, then back to her face. "So others don't have to." Silence dropped over the table. It was heavy, suffocating. Isabella's smile froze, turning brittle. Leo dropped his fork, the silver clattering loudly against the china. He leaned forward, his face flushing dark red. "Watch your tone," Leo snarled. "You're a glorified secretary." Clara didn't blink. She didn't look at Leo. She kept her eyes on Isabella. Next to her, Gabriel finally moved. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply shifted his weight, turning his head to look at Leo. "Leo," Gabriel said softly. The single word hung in the air. It wasn't a request for peace. It was a promise of violence. Leo froze. The anger in his eyes warred with self-preservation. Self-preservation won. He leaned back in his chair, muttering something under his breath, and picked up his wine glass. Gabriel turned back to his meal as if nothing had happened. But beneath the edge of the heavy linen tablecloth, his hand moved. His fingers wrapped around Clara's wrist, gripping the delicate bones with crushing, bruising force. His thumb pressed hard into her pulse point. He was furious, not at Leo, at her. She had stepped out of the shadow. She had challenged the illusion he was so carefully constructing. Clara kept her face perfectly blank. She didn't try to pull her hand away. She let him feel her steady, even pulse. She wasn't afraid of his anger. She was banking on it. A man governed by anger made mistakes. The rest of the dinner passed in tense, heavily monitored silence. When the plates were cleared and the contracts signed, Gabriel escorted Isabella to her waiting town car. Clara stood a few paces back on the wet pavement, watching the red taillights bleed into the fog. Gabriel turned to her. The street was empty. The valets had wisely retreated into the shadows. "Get in the car," he said. The smooth veneer was gone. His voice was raw. Clara got in. The trap was set. Now she just had to wait for it to spring. They didn't return to Gabriel's primary penthouse. The black SUV wound through the city, crossing the river, moving away from the glittering high-rises of the financial district and into an older, wealthier, quieter neighborhood. The driver pulled into an underground garage secured by reinforced steel gates. Clara cataloged this route. 3 turns off the main arterial road. 2 sets of private security checkpoints. Gabriel remained completely silent for the entire 30-minute drive. He stared out the tinted window, a dark silhouette against the passing streetlights. The elevator opened directly into a sprawling modern apartment. It was a fortress disguised as an architectural digest feature. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Lake Michigan, churning black and violent under the night sky. The furniture was minimalist, expensive, and cold. There were no personal touches, no photographs, no books. "Where are we?" Clara asked, dropping her clutch onto a massive slab of a marble kitchen island. "A secondary property under a holding company," Gabriel said, shrugging off his suit jacket and tossing it over the back of a chair. He loosened his tie and unfastened the top 2 buttons of his shirt. He looked exhausted again, the adrenaline of the dinner wearing off, leaving behind a grim reality. "I manage your holding companies," Clara pointed out, crossing her arms over her chest, suddenly feeling freezing in the thin silk dress. "All 52 of them. This isn't on the books." "It's on a different set of books," he replied, walking to a hidden wet bar and pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid into a heavy crystal glass. He didn't offer her one. "There are things I keep isolated, even from you." Clara let out a bitter, sharp laugh. "Clearly. So this is what? A safe house? A black site? Where do you keep the zip ties and the plastic sheeting?" Gabriel stopped. He turned slowly, the glass suspended in midair. The look he gave her was so profoundly bleak, it made Clara's breath catch in her throat. "It's a home, Clara," he said quietly. He walked toward her, closing the distance until she could smell the scotch and the faint metallic tang of the city rain on his clothes. "I bought it 2 years ago, after the hit on my uncle, after you stayed awake for 4 days straight cleaning up the fallout, making sure I didn't go to federal prison. I bought it and I put it under a blind trust, because I knew, eventually, my father's dying promises would catch up with me. I knew I would have to marry a Merino. He set the glass down on the marble counter. He reached out and touched her arm. Clara didn't pull away. She was too stunned by the admission. Gabriel Costa didn't justify his actions. He dictated reality. "I built this place for you," he confessed, his voice dropping to a rough murmur. "A place where the syndicate doesn't exist, where the Merino family can't reach. It's impenetrable. You have everything you need here." Clara stared at him, trying to comprehend the sheer scale of his delusion. "You built me a cage." "I built you a sanctuary." "A sanctuary you can lock from the outside," she countered, stepping back, breaking his touch. The air felt thin. "Gabriel, listen to yourself. You are marrying Isabella. You are merging the families. You expect me to live in this glass box, waiting for you to carve out a few hours a week to visit me, to be your secret, your shadow? I expect you to survive," he roared, the sudden explosion of sound echoing off the bare walls. He slammed his hand flat against the marble. "Do you think Leo Merino is going to let my most trusted confidant just walk away? Do you think they don't know you hold the keys to my entire financial structure? The second you step foot outside my protection, you are a liability. They will put a bullet in your head just to see if I bleed. I know how to disappear. I had everything arranged." "Your arrangements were sloppy," Gabriel dismissed, his anger cooling back into that terrifying, icy calm. "A burner phone? A flight to Heathrow? You would have been tracked before you cleared international airspace. You are too valuable. To me and to my enemies. So you protect me by imprisoning me." "I protect you by keeping you exactly where I can see you," he said. He walked past her, heading toward the master hallway. "There are clothes in the closet. My men will drop off groceries in the morning. Don't try the elevators. The biometric scanners have been wiped. Only my thumbprint opens the doors." He paused in the archway, his back to her. "You want to be angry with me, Clara? Be angry, hate me, scream at the walls, but you will do it alive, and you will do it here." He left. Clara stood in the dead center of the massive kitchen. The silence of the apartment was absolute. It was soundproofed. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Far below, the headlights of cars moved like tiny, insignificant insects. She wasn't going to scream at the walls. She wasn't going to hate him. Hate was an emotion, and emotions clouded judgment. She was going to burn his sanctuary to the ground. 72 hours. That was how long Clara had been locked in the sky. The apartment was exactly as Gabriel described. Impenetrable. The windows were reinforced glass, unbreakable without heavy ordnance. The doors were solid steel core, sealed with biometric locks that didn't just require a fingerprint, but a pulse. There was no landline. The Wi-Fi network was completely locked down, restricted to a closed intranet that offered nothing but a curated selection of news sites and streaming services. Every morning at 8 a.m., the private elevator hummed to life. Two men in dark suits stepped out. They didn't speak. They placed 3 bags of high-end groceries on the counter, collected the trash, and left. Gabriel hadn't returned. He was letting her stew. He was applying the isolation tactic he used on rival capos who refused to bend the knee. strip them of agency, remove their access to information, and wait for the psychological fracture. He had forgotten one crucial detail. Clara had written the manual on those tactics. On the morning of the fourth day, Clara sat at the kitchen island, a cup of black coffee cooling in front of her. She wore a pair of soft gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt she had found in the master closet. She looked defeated. Her hair was messy, her shoulders slumped. When the elevator doors dinged open, she didn't look up. The two guards stepped out. One carried the groceries, the other stood by the door, hand resting casually near his holster. Standard protocol. Clara watched them from the corner of her eye. The guard by the door was new. He was young, maybe 22, with a nervous energy that vibrated beneath his cheap suit. He kept checking his watch. He was distracted. The older guard placed the bags on the counter. Mr. Costa requested you make a list of any specific items you require for the rest of the week. Clara slowly lifted her head. She kept her expression hollow, her voice flat. I need a tablet or a laptop. I don't care if it's air-gapped. I want to read books that aren't on his approved streaming list. I want to download some files. Fiction. The older guard frowned, exchanging a look with the younger one. I will relay the request. They left. That evening, the elevator returned. It wasn't the guards. It was Gabriel. He stepped into the apartment carrying a sleek silver laptop. He looked worse than before. The shadows under his eyes were bruised, his jaw clenched tight. The merger with the Marino family was taking its toll. Managing a syndicate was hard. Managing an alliance built on mutual mistrust was a nightmare. He walked to the island and set the laptop down. It's heavily restricted, Gabriel said, his voice devoid of warmth. No external email servers, no messaging apps. It connects to a secure VPN that routes directly through my IT department. They will monitor every keystroke. Thank you, Clara said softly. She didn't move toward it. She kept her distance. Play the broken bird. Gabriel watched her. He hated seeing her like this, stripped of her sharp edges, but his need for control superseded his guilt. I brought you some files. Architectural plans for the new casino project. I thought, you might want something to look at. You always liked finding the flaws in the blueprints. It was an olive branch, wrapped in barbed wire. He was offering her work. He wanted her brain, her utility, even while keeping her caged. Just leave it, she murmured. Gabriel hesitated, hovering near the island. For a terrifying second, Clara thought he might reach for her. But he pulled back, his discipline holding firm. He turned and walked back to the elevator, the heavy steel doors sliding shut behind him. The moment the lock engaged, Clara's demeanor shifted. The slump vanished from her spine. Her eyes sharpened. She walked to the laptop and opened it. She didn't immediately go to work. She spent the next 5 hours browsing. She downloaded classic literature PDFs. She clicked through Wikipedia articles on Roman architecture. She established a pattern of bored, aimless behavior for the IT guys monitoring her traffic. At 2:00 a.m., she opened the architectural files Gabriel had provided. Gabriel was arrogant, but he wasn't stupid. He wouldn't give her access to sensitive current operations. The casino project was old news, a legitimate front already heavily publicized. The blueprints were massive, high-resolution CAD files, hundreds of megabytes each, perfect for hiding a digital payload. Clara knew the Costa Syndicate's IT infrastructure intimately. She had hired the lead security architect 3 years ago. She knew his protocols, and more importantly, she knew his blind spots. He relied heavily on automated packet sniffing for outgoing traffic, looking for keywords or known encrypted signatures. He rarely did manual sweeps on large, static files being sent back to the internal servers. She opened a basic text editor. She didn't write an email. She didn't try to hack the firewall. She wrote a script. It was a simple, elegant piece of code. It didn't steal data. It just created a microscopic backdoor in the VPN tunnel, forcing it to duplicate a fraction of its traffic to a dead-drop server Clara had set up years ago for emergencies. A server completely divorced from her frozen bank accounts and her burned identity. She embedded the script into the metadata of the largest architectural blueprint file. It took her 3 hours to encode it manually, keystroke by keystroke, burying it deep within the pixel data of the image. To the IT monitors, it would just look like she was zooming in and out of the blueprint, making standard modifications. At 6 a.m., she saved the file. The next time Gabriel logged into the shared network to review her work, the script would latch onto his administrative credentials. It wouldn't give her control of his empire, but it would give her eyes. She would be able to see the internal communications of the Costa Syndicate. Most importantly, she would be able to see his communications with the Marino family. Clara closed the laptop and walked to the window. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the dark water of the lake in bleeding streaks of orange and red. Gabriel thought she was his prisoner. He thought he had cut off her hands. He forgot that Clara Bennett didn't need hands to dismantle a man. She just needed information. And in a war between monsters, information was the only blade sharp enough to cut a god down to size. She leaned her head against the glass and smiled. It was a cold, cruel expression, a perfect mirror of the man who had locked her inside. The game hadn't ended when he closed the door. It had just moved to a smaller board. The ping came on a Tuesday afternoon. Clara was sitting on the floor by the massive windows, watching the rain lash against the glass. The city was a smear of gray and bruised purple. The laptop sat open on the coffee table. A tiny green icon flashed in the corner of her custom text editor. Gabriel had logged in. He had opened the CAD file. Clara moved to the couch, pulling the machine onto her lap. Her script executed flawlessly. A line of code bypassed the packet sniffers, establishing a microscopic one-way mirror into the Costa internal servers. It didn't give her administrative control, but it gave her a read-only feed of Gabriel's Active Directory. Lines of text began scrolling across her screen. She spent the next 48 hours doing what she did best. She mined the data. She ignored the legitimate business fronts and filtered out the daily operational chatter of the street bosses. She focused entirely on the communications involving the Marino family. It was a tangled web of posturing and veiled threats disguised as logistical planning. The wedding date was set for October. The shipping routes were being integrated. On paper, it was a flawless merger. But Clara didn't look at the paper. She looked at the gaps. She cross-referenced the shipping manifests with the port schedules Gabriel's men were forwarding to Leo Marino. Leo was in charge of receiving the imported luxury goods that covered their less palatable cargo. By Thursday morning, Clara found the discrepancy. It was a subtle shift in tonnage. 3 ships arriving from Palermo over the last month were registered at a specific weight upon departure. When they docked in Chicago, the recorded weight on the internal ledgers was 5% lighter. The customs paperwork matched the heavier weight, meaning Leo was offloading cargo before it hit the main inspection bays, keeping it entirely off Gabriel's books. She dug deeper into Leo's private communications, tracing a series of encrypted payments routed through a shell company in the Caymans. She recognized the routing numbers. They belonged to a private mercenary outfit operating out of Eastern Europe. Men who didn't care about syndicate politics, only wire transfers. Leo wasn't stealing money. He was importing untraceable weapons and hiring outside muscle. He was planning a coup. Clara sat back, rubbing her burning eyes. The blue light of the screen cast harsh shadows across her face. She looked at the date attached to the final shipment of arms. Next Friday, the night of Gabriel's bachelor party, a joint affair hosted by Leo at an isolated hunting lodge in Wisconsin, a gesture of brotherhood. Gabriel was walking into a slaughterhouse. Clara closed the laptop. The silence of the apartment pressed in on her. She had her leverage. She could watch the timeline tick down, wait for Leo to assassinate Gabriel, and then use the ensuing chaos to negotiate her release with whoever took over the Costa territory. Or she could acknowledge the fatal flaw in that plan. If Gabriel died, the biometric locks on this penthouse would default to a permanent lockdown. She would starve in this glass box before anyone thought to look for her. Beyond logic, there was a colder, heavier truth. She hated Gabriel for locking her up. She hated his possessive arrogance. But she didn't want him dead. She wanted to beat him. She wanted him to stand aside and watch her walk out the door. At 10 p.m., the heavy thud of the elevator mechanisms echoed through the walls. Gabriel stepped out. He looked ruined. His tie was gone. His suit jacket slung over one shoulder. There was a fresh cut along his jawline, the edges red and angry. He walked straight to the liquor cabinet, poured a massive measure of scotch, and drank half of it in a single swallow. He didn't acknowledge her immediately. He leaned heavily against the counter, staring at the floor. The weight of his empire was crushing him. He was a man trying to hold together a house of cards in a hurricane. Clara stood up. She picked up the laptop, carried it to the kitchen island, and turned it around so the screen faced him. "You're bleeding," she said quietly. Gabriel finally looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. "A disagreement with a local distributor. It's handled." He looked at the laptop. "Are you finally reviewing the casino plans?" "No," Clara said. "I'm reviewing Leo Marino's assassination plot against you." Gabriel went perfectly still. The exhaustion seemed to evaporate, replaced instantly by the lethal, coiled tension of a predator. He set the glass down. He didn't rush the island. He took slow, measured steps until he stood opposite her, the marble counter between them. He looked at the screen. Clara had pulled up a summary dashboard she had built. It displayed the missing tonnage, the shell company routing numbers, and the contracts with the mercenary outfit. He read the screen for a long, silent minute. "How did you get this?" His voice was a flat, terrifying monotone. "You gave me a laptop," Clara said, leaning her hands on the edge of the marble, refusing to shrink back. "You gave me access to your network. You thought because you restricted the outgoing servers, I couldn't build a window from the inside out. You underestimated me. You always do." Gabriel's jaw clenched. He looked from the screen to her face. "You hid a script in the CAD files. I hid a back door in the metadata. When you opened the file on your primary terminal, you authorized my access. I've been reading your internal comms for 3 days. A muscle ticked in Gabriel's cheek. Anger warred with a dark, reluctant admiration. He reached out to turn the laptop toward him. his fingers brushing the keys as he scrolled through the raw data she had attached as proof. "He's skimming heavy artillery off the Palermo shipments," Gabriel murmured, piecing it together as he read. "Stashing them before Port Authority logs the final weight. And he's hired outside shooters," Clara added. "The wire transfers line up with the bachelor party in Wisconsin next week. It's isolated. Your security detail will be relaxed because it's a family event. They are going to kill you, Gabriel. And then Leo will take over the Costa territory, claiming a rival family hit you." Gabriel closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. When he opened them, the cold calculation was back. The Mafia boss had returned. He tapped the marble counter. "You have the full decryption keys for these wire transfers? The actual communications between Leo and the mercenaries?" "I do." "Give them to me. I need the hard proof to present to the commission before I strip Leo of his rank and put a bullet in his head. If I move on him without proof, Isabella's father will declare war." Clara reached out and closed the laptop. The sharp snap echoed in the quiet room. "No." Gabriel stared at her. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of unsaid threats. "Clara," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register, "do not play games with this. This is my life. This is the syndicate. This is my life," she fired back, her voice rising, the carefully constructed ice finally cracking. "You locked me in a vault. You stole my money. You froze my identity. And you told me I had to rot here until you found the time to visit me. You don't get my help for free anymore. The contract is broken." Gabriel gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles turning white. "What do you want?" "My passport," Clara said. Her demands were practiced, sharp. $75,000 in unmarked bills, a car waiting in the underground garage, keys in the ignition, and you lift the freeze on my primary accounts. "And if I say no? If I just take the laptop?" "I encrypted the core files. The password is 32 characters long. If you enter it wrong 3 times, the hard drive wipes itself. You bring your IT guys in here to crack it, it will take them weeks. You have 6 days until Wisconsin." Gabriel stepped around the island. Clara held her ground, forcing herself to breathe evenly as he crowded into her personal space. He loomed over her, a dark shadow smelling of scotch and copper. "You would let him kill me," Gabriel said. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. "I would let you suffer the consequences of your own arrogance," Clara corrected, looking up into his dark, furious eyes. "You told me I belong here, managing the chaos. Well, the chaos is at your door, Gabriel, and the manager is demanding her severance package." He reached out. His large hand wrapped around the back of her neck, his thumb resting against her jaw. His grip was firm, holding her in place. The touch was agonizingly familiar. "You are the most ruthless creature I have ever met," he whispered, his face inches from hers. "I learned from the best." Gabriel stared at her lips, then up to her eyes. He was searching for a bluff, a crack in her resolve. He found nothing. She was entirely hollowed out, hardened into steel by his own hand. He released her slowly. He stepped back, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt, straightening his posture. The mask slid perfectly back into place. "The passport is in my wall safe at the main office. I will bring it tomorrow, along with the cash. And the car? The car will be waiting." He turned toward the elevator. He didn't look back as he stepped inside. Have the decryption keys ready by tomorrow night, Clara, or I won't just lock the door when I leave. I'll weld it shut. 24 hours is a long time to sit with a loaded gun, even a digital one. Clara spent Monday pacing the perimeter of the penthouse. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a $1 million view of a city that felt entirely dead. She watched the storms roll in off Lake Michigan, gray sheets of rain battering the reinforced glass. She didn't eat. The high-end groceries the guards had dropped off days ago sat rotting in the crisper drawers. She drank tap water and black coffee, mapping out every possible permutation of the night to come. If Gabriel decided his pride was worth more than his life, he wouldn't show. He would handle Leo blindly, risking a massive war with the Marino family, just to prove Clara couldn't hold him hostage. That was the inherent danger of men who built their lives on absolute dominance. Sometimes they preferred the house to burn down, rather than let someone else hold the extinguisher. By 11 p.m. on Tuesday, the silence in the apartment was a physical weight. Clara sat on the edge of the minimalist white sofa. She wore the plain black trousers and the crisp white button-down she had arrived in. She looked like an executive assistant. She needed to feel like one. Armor came in many forms. Hers was dry cleaned and neatly pressed. At exactly 11:14 p.m., the heavy mechanical hum of the private elevator vibrated through the floorboards. Clara stood. She smoothed a non-existent crease from her slacks. She regulated her breathing. In through the nose, 4 seconds. Out through the mouth, 6. The steel doors parted. Gabriel stepped into the penthouse. The air pressure in the room shifted, sucked entirely into the orbit of his presence. He wore a heavy wool overcoat, pitch black and damp with city rain. The collar was turned up. He looked completely hollowed out. The sharp, immaculate lines of the Mafia boss were gone, replaced by the grim reality of a butcher who had just clocked out of a long shift. He didn't speak. He walked a slow, heavy line straight to the kitchen island. From his deep coat pocket, he pulled a thick, tightly packed manila envelope and dropped it onto the cold marble. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud. Next to it, he placed a small silver key fob. Your passport, your new identities, the cash. Gabriel's voice was a flat, scraped-out rasp. The freeze on your accounts has been lifted. There is a black sedan parked in spot 42 in the sub-garage. The tank is full. Clara didn't lunge for the items. She held her ground. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, heavy-duty USB drive. It contained the unredacted communications, the encrypted wire transfers, and the audio files of Leo Marino purchasing a hit squad. She placed it on the counter and slid it across the marble. Everything is there, Clara said. The keys, the audio, the shell company routing numbers. Gabriel looked down at the tiny piece of plastic. He didn't pick it up. He stared at it for a long, silent minute, listening to the rain beat against the glass. I don't need it, he finally murmured. Clara frowned, a cold spike of adrenaline hitting her system. What do you mean? I dealt with Leo 3 hours ago. Gabriel raised his head. His eyes were entirely dead. I invited him to a private dinner at the warehouse on the south side. I showed him a fraction of the raw data you compiled, just enough to let him know he was exposed. And he reached for a weapon. He was always a predictable animal. Gabriel slowly unbuttoned his overcoat. As the heavy wool parted, Clara saw the dark, wet stain soaking through the pristine white cotton of his shirt, just above his ribs. He caught her looking and gave a dismissive shake of his head. "It's not mine. Isabella is currently being sedated by her private physician. She is grieving the sudden, tragic loss of her brother to a botched robbery. The merger will proceed next month. The Costa Syndicate remains secure." He had moved faster than she calculated. He hadn't waited for the concrete proof to take to the commission. He had used her initial findings to force a violent confrontation, relying on his own brutality to survive it. "Then why did you come here?" Clara asked, her voice tightening. "Why bring the money? If Leo is dead and the threat is gone, you could have just let me rot here." Gabriel walked slowly around the edge of the island. Clara forced her feet to remain planted. She would not retreat. He stopped mere inches from her. Up close, he smelled of rain, expensive cedar wood, and the sharp, unmistakable metallic tang of violence. "Because I saw the look in Leo's eyes before he died," Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a rough, intimate whisper. "He thought he could outsmart me because he didn't understand how my empire functioned. He didn't understand it because I never let anyone see the engine." He reached out. Clara flinched internally, but held entirely still. Gabriel gently grazed the line of her cheekbone with the back of his knuckles. His skin was freezing cold. "You are the engine, Clara," he confessed, the admission torn from somewhere deep and painful. "You built the very walls I stand behind. You know every fracture, every structural weakness in my life. I locked you in this glass box because I thought I was securing my most valuable asset. But you aren't an asset. You are my equal." His thumb brushed over the corner of her mouth. It was an agonizingly tender gesture from a man whose hands were built for ruin. "You cannot cage an equal without turning them into an enemy," he said. Clara felt a sudden, suffocating tightness in her throat. For 4 years, she had craved this exact acknowledgement. She had wanted him to see her, truly see her, not just as a tool, but as a partner. Now hearing the words out loud, they tasted like ash. The cost of this realization had been her freedom, her safety, and whatever fragile trust had once existed between them in the dark. "You are a monster, Gabriel," Clara whispered. She didn't pull away from his touch. She let herself feel the cold weight of his hand one last time. "You kill, you manipulate, and you consume everything that gets close to you. You are a black hole." "I am exactly what this city requires me to be," he replied, his eyes searching hers for a forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. "I know," Clara said, "but it doesn't require me." She took a step back, breaking the contact. The cold air rushed in to fill the space between them. She walked to the counter, picked up the manila envelope, and slipped the silver key fob into her pocket. She grabbed her heavy duffel bag from the floor, slinging the strap over her shoulder. It dug painfully into her collarbone, a grounding physical reminder of gravity. Gabriel watched her. He made absolutely no move to stop her. The feral, possessive rage that had driven him to lock her in this penthouse was completely extinguished. It left behind a profound, hollow acceptance. He was a king standing in a desolate, empty castle. Clara walked to the elevator. She pressed the call button. The machinery whirred to life. She turned to look at him one last time. He stood silhouetted against the dark, rain-streaked windows, a solitary figure swallowed by the shadows of his own making. "Goodbye, Gabriel," Clara said. Her voice didn't shake. Gabriel didn't offer a goodbye in return. He simply nodded, a slow, heavy dip of his chin. "You were right about one thing," he said, right as the steel doors began to slide shut. "You don't fit into a clean slate. You never did." The doors met with a sharp, definitive click. His face vanished. The elevator began its long descent. The low hum of the cables felt like a continuous, drawn-out exhalation. Clara stood dead center in the descending metal box. Her hands began to tremble, a violent, delayed reaction to the adrenaline finally leaving her system. She clutched the manila envelope tightly against her chest, feeling the thick, rigid stack of bills and the stiff cardboard of a passport bearing a stranger's name. She stepped out into the subterranean garage. The air was brutally cold and smelled sharply of gasoline and damp concrete. She found the black sedan waiting in spot 42. She unlocked it, tossed her bag onto the passenger seat, and slid behind the wheel. The engine purred to life, a quiet, powerful beast. Clara didn't look back in the rearview mirror as she navigated the spiraling ramps to the surface. She merged onto the desolate, rain-slicked streets of Chicago. The neon lights of late-night diners and corner liquor stores bled in colorful streaks across the wet asphalt. She drove straight toward the interstate, leaving the towering, glittering skyline behind her. She was bruised. She was utterly exhausted. Her soul felt permanently marked by the 4 years she had spent managing a monster in the dark. But as the city lights faded into the black void of the highway, Clara took a deep, shuddering breath of unfiltered air. She gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. She was alive. And for the first time in 4 years, she was entirely, terrifyingly free. The cage is broken, and Clara is finally free. But we all know men like Gabriel Costa don't just forget. Do you think he'll truly let her walk away, or is this just the calm before a much darker storm? Drop your theories in the comments below. If this tense game of chess kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button, share it with a friend who loves mafia drama, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next dark romance drop. Thanks for listening, and stay safe in the shadows.